Hi, Joe. Thanks for coming in today.
Yep, happy to be here.
Were you able to fill out the forms?
Yeah, I have forms right here.
Awesome. Can I take a look?
Yep.
So, did you have any questions or problems filling out these forms?
Um, no problems. Pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question.
Yeah.
What these forms are?
Yeah. So these forms are just to assess anxiety and depression, and so it just allows me to quickly look at over this before a session and see where you're at, engage how you're feeling, and so we can go over this together if you would like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, for the depression assessment, so you got a score of 6, and so that is a low level of depression. So what you're experiencing, it's considered normal. And so you aren't feeling the symptoms of depression like loneliness or sadness, isolation. Does that seem accurate to you?
Yep. I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah. Okay. And so for the anxiety, so you got a 35. So that's on kind of the higher scale on the moderate anxiety. And so it seems like you've been feeling anxious this past week. Does that seem true?
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
Yeah. What's been occurring this past week?
Well,
That's, I guess, making you feel anxious.
yeah, I've currently been going through a divorce.
Mm.
After a marriage of over 10 years, nearly 10 years. And I guess there's just a lot going on and I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how I feel anymore.
Yeah, that sounds like it definitely sounds anxiety inducing. And so, um, and yeah, so I'm glad that we were able to do these mood checks. As you can see, they can be helpful in pinpointing what you've been feeling, but sometimes they're also not true. They might be inaccurate. So that's why I like to ask if, you know, if they ring true for you. So it seems like you've been feeling a lot of anxiety this past week. Okay, so before we start the session, I kind of just wanted to go through agenda because it is our first session and kind of wanted to let you know what you can expect from the session and also just to kind of keep us, on track and helping you. And so our session, we're gonna do a mood check, which we just did, and then we're gonna quickly talk about what you've been going through this past week. And then once we do that, we can try to set a personal goal, a goal that you want to achieve next week, or by next week. And then we can create an action plan. And an action plan is just certain actions that are able for you to accomplish that goal that you set out. And then afterwards, we're going to do a quick feedback like we did on our previous session, just to gauge how you're feeling throughout the session and what's been going through your mind throughout therapy. So does that sound good to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, let's get started. So we did a mood check. So you were telling me you're feeling anxious, and you were saying that you're feeling anxious because of did you say a recent divorce? Yeah. So what else was occurring this past week?
Um, yeah, some other things that have been occurring this past week. I've been my family. They visited me after not seeing them for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and did you find that anxiety inducing as well?
Yeah, I felt a little bit of it. Yeah.
Did you feel what else were you feeling this past week? Were there any like positive moods, emotions?
Um, I also felt nervous at times. Um, and afraid.
Afraid.
Uh, I can't really think of any positive emotions that really stick out to me.
Yeah, it seems like you were going through a lot of different types of emotions.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to do you find it having a hard time like trying to identify those emotions throughout the week, or does it seem like you're able to like know specifically what you're feeling?
Sometimes um, it does feel specific, but most of the time, I'm not quite exactly sure how I'm feeling in that situation or that moment.
Oh, interesting. So, and you said most of the time.
Yeah, most of the times. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned feelings of anxiety and nervousness and being afraid. Um, and to you, do they seem to be? Are you able to pinpoint specific like each situation when you're feeling that way, or does it seem like it's just overwhelming and just you don't know when you feel those?
I'd say it's more overwhelming, and I'm not quite sure what I'm feeling or what situation it is or anything really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And so, what is the biggest thing that is creating? Well, I guess what's the biggest anxiety inducing thing or a lot of emotions, mixed emotions with that you felt this past week? Was it your divorce?
Um, yeah, I think the divorce um, has just really made me unsure myself and how I'm feeling, and has bled into other parts of my life and just affected me in the um, overwhelming of just general unsureness.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that definitely can happen when some big event is happening and there's just a flood of emotions. Have you have you thought about ever trying to like identify your moods before?
Um, I don't think I've ever tried doing that before.
Yeah. Um, so I think I have a great exercise we can do later in the session, and it's about identifying and also rating your moods. Um, would you be open to exploring those type of exercises with me later?
Yeah, yeah, sounds like a good idea. We'll try it out.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And so before we get to that section, I just want to talk about the goal setting. So did you have any let's try to start small. So what is a goal that you will want to set for next week? And it could be anything. It could be that you want to do a certain physical activity more, but it also could be something like that's mental, like you want to achieve a certain type of emotion.
Um, I think I'd like to feel a sense of calmness.
Calmness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. um so calmness. Okay, so your personal goal for next week is to achieve a sense of calmness. And so what does calmness look to you?
Um, um, it's it's hard for me to visualize it, but I guess
Mm.
the just any kind of reduced um, or just a reduction of how overwhelmed I've been feeling in any way. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think you were trying to say that you want a reduction of that overwhelming mixed feelings, out of controlness. going on. And so in order to reduce that, that would achieve a sense of calmness to you. Yeah? Okay. Yeah. That is a great goal. And honestly, that aligns perfectly to our exercises because so what we're going to be doing next is, so we set a goal. So we're going to try to do some exercises that allows you to try to identify your moods. And going back to, cognitive model, which is what CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is what you're doing. The goal is that if you can identify your moods, you can also identify and your thoughts, and be able to separate them, you have a better way of navigating them, a better way of controlling them. So, for example, in our worksheet that we're going to be doing, we're going to be trying to figure out the moods that correlate to a situation. And so you can imagine that if you were able to, figure out the situation that elicits that mood, you can prepare yourself better. For example, you find yourself in that situation, you have a better idea of what mood is going to happen. And you have a sense of more awareness of that mood. And you also have a sense of being in control. So it doesn't feel like these moods are just occurring whenever, like they're overwhelming, they're out of control. It's that being able to identify the mood, you're able to identify the situation. And then it just allows you to prepare yourself and be more in control of what's going to happen. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where our second exercise we're going to do. And then we're going to rate your moods too, to figure out like how intense each situation or each mood is. But before we get to that, let's talk about moods. Because it seems to me that you had a hard time identifying specific moods, and that they were just kind of all mixed together. Yeah. That is. That definitely. Moods are very complicated. So I'm gonna give you this list. So it's a mood list, and so they have a list of moods, and of course there's so much more. And if you ever find them, figure out a mood that's not on the list, you can definitely write it here. But I want you to spend a few minutes looking over this list, and they have the mood that you were talking about a lot this past week, that you're feeling anxious. But with anxiety, there's also a lot of other moods that are coupled with anxiety. And so our goal is to try to be as specific as we can. And so I want you to look at this list and see if any moods scream out to you, and if you felt any of those this past week.
I definitely see a few of these really ringing out to me.
Yeah, which ones?
I see nervous and grief and anxiousness.
Nervousness, grief, and anxiousness. Yeah. So having this list of moods would be great, because whenever you're feeling a certain way and you don't know how to, put a name to it, you can look through this list and try to figure it out. And having a list is always great. Would you want to keep this piece of paper?
Yeah, I'll keep it.
Awesome. Okay. And yeah, this would be handy for you for our next exercise too. So our next exercise is identifying and rating moods. And so this is a great list to have, because you're going to have to try to identify that mood that you're feeling. So here's what it looks like. So why don't we try to do the first exercise together and see how you feel about it. So we're going to try to figure out, so I want you to reflect this past week, the moods that you're feeling, And let's try to just keep it to one because, like, again, moods are very complicated when they're mixed all together. So let's just try to identify one, and if there needs to be two, then of course you can write two. But let's keep it simple. And then once you've identified that mood, I want you to try to remember that situation and try to be as specific as you can. And this could be like the people you're meeting, the way your body feels, like what situation what situation did you feel like, was there when you're feeling that. So I want you to spend a few minutes thinking about it and let me know when you thought about the mood and then also about the situation.
All right. I think I'm ready to share. So a mood I was thinking about was nervousness.
Nervousness.
And I remember I was feeling nervous last week when I was going out with my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let me grab a pencil so you can fill it out. Give me a second. So I want you to write specifically what you just told me. You're feeling nervous. And then what was the situation again?
Just going out with friends.
Going out with friends. So yeah, put that there. Were you going anywhere specific?
We were going to a club.
Going to a club.
So a very social place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So why don't you write that down for the situation? And did you remember when you're feeling nervousness, any body sensations that you can recall?
I felt chills and my heart was beating.
Yeah. So why don't you write that down? That's great information to know. So basically what you just said, what you just accomplished was that next time when you know that you're going to a club, or if you're feeling a sense of your heart beating and certain chills, you know that you're about to feel really nervous. And later in our sessions we can figure out how to create strategies to cope with that, to alleviate that. But in this session we're just going to try to identify those moods, and in hopes to make you feel less overwhelmed with your emotions and feel more in control, as if they're not coming out of just thin air. So how did you feel about that exercise?
It felt pretty good. I never really thought of thinking about how I felt, thinking back on like my week and how things make me feel.
Yeah, it's nice. So let's talk about the action plans. Have you ever heard of an action plan in therapy before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, so I think I talked about it briefly in our in the beginning of our session, but an action plan is it's specific to CBT, and it's basically certain actions that we both talk about and agree on that you work on to achieve that goal. And did you remember that personal goal that you set this session for next week?
A sense of calmness.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think a great action plan for you would be to try to fill out the rest of these section throughout the week. And then once you fill them out, I think it will work towards that personal goal of feeling a sense of calmness because you become more aware of your emotions. Does it sound like doable, filling these out next week? Yeah. And so once you fill them out, remember to bring them in our next session or take a picture of it if you forget. And so then we can talk about it in our next session to see, like, the ranges of emotions that you were going through throughout the week. And we can also talk about whether or not you did feel a sense of calmness if you by filling those out, if it did help for you to achieve your goal. Oh, and something I forgot to mention was the rating here. It seems like you already rated here 30 to 40, but so cool. So this makes sense, this rating scale.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, it's just for us to see how high the nerve or how high the mood is, and then we can like gauge from there, just to regulate or just to monitor the intensity of the moods. Okay, so that is going to be your action plan for next week, and you're going to bring it in, and we're going to be able to talk about the ranges of emotions you're going through and whether or not it helped the personal goal that you set. So does that sound okay with you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, yay. Okay, I'm so excited for you to figure out the moods that you're going to be feeling next week. Throughout this past next week. So that's coming to end on our session, and I just want to give you a quick summary of what we went through, just to remind you all the work that you put in. So we did a mood check, and it seems that you were having a high level of anxiety, and we explored anxiety a little deeper. You were feeling anxiety about the current situation of your divorce. And also you've said that you had a sense of nervousness and feeling afraid the past week too. I think you mentioned something about meeting your family. Had that. And you also talked about that your emotions felt like it was coming, they were overwhelming and out of control and something that you could not pinpoint. And so now that... So then we set a goal, and the goal was for you to the goal was a sense of calmness next week, and then we created an action plan of filling out these exercises to help achieve that goal. So does that sound does that sound like what we did throughout the session?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. And you said that the homework is something that is doable and achievable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So now in this session, I wanted to talk about the feedback. So how did you feel throughout this session?
I think this was rather helpful. It's this laying out the moods and situation and thinking back on it. It's simple but helpful.
Okay. So, and any questions, any concerns that you want me to know?
Not really.
Okay, awesome. Well, of course, if you ever feel any concerns or questions throughout the session, or if you want therapy to look or be more a certain way, feel free to let me know throughout any part of the session.
Yep.
Well, it was great to see you, Chow, and I can't wait to see you next week and all the work you do.
See you next week.
Okay, see you next week.